I took the job because my brother's medical bills were mounting. The ad was simple: night watchman, Riverside Stadium, $12 an hour, no experience necessary. When I called, a gruff voice told me to come for an interview the next day. The stadium was old, built in the 1960s, and had been abandoned for 5 years since the city's team moved to a newer facility downtown. My interview consisted of a handshake with a man named Henderson who introduced himself as the groundskeeper. He wore a faded uniform with a patch that read Riverside Ravens. He didn't ask about my qualifications, just whether I could follow instructions precisely. I nodded. He handed me a set of keys and a folded piece of paper. "Start tonight at 10 p.m. Your shift ends at 6 a.m. The gates lock at 11. Don't be late." I drove home thinking about how $12 an hour for 8 hours was $96 a night. That was nearly $700 a week, more than enough to help with my brother's treatments. When I returned at 9:45 p.m., Henderson was waiting by the service entrance. He led me through a maze of corridors beneath the stands. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and old popcorn. "This is your office," he said, unlocking a door marked Security. The room was small, containing a desk, 2 chairs, a radio, and a bank of monitors. Only 3 of the monitors worked. "The rules are on your desk. Read them twice. Don't deviate." Henderson pointed to a clipboard hanging on the wall. "Log everything. Times, observations, anything unusual. Even if it seems normal, log it." He handed me a heavy flashlight. "Batteries are in the top drawer. Take 3 sets with you on patrol." He looked at his watch. "It's 9:57. I have 3 minutes to show you the patrol route." We walked through the empty concourse, our footsteps echoing. Main concourse first, then lower bowl, upper bowl, press box, and finally the service tunnels beneath. That's it, nothing else. He stopped at a door marked Pool Maintenance. "Never go in here. Never." At 10 o'clock exactly, he stopped at the employee exit. "My shift is over. Yours begins. Lock this door behind me and don't open it for anyone until 6 a.m. I watched him walk to his truck, the sound of his boots fading in the night. I locked the door as instructed and returned to the office. On the desk was a laminated sheet titled Stadium Night Watch Protocol. I read it once, then again. The rules were: 1. Between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m., patrol the main concourse every 30 minutes. After 1 a.m., patrol every hour. Never vary from this schedule. 2. When you hear footsteps in the upper bowl during your patrol, do not look up. Continue walking at the same pace. Do not speed up or slow down. 3. The lights in the west section of the lower bowl will sometimes turn on by themselves. If this happens, count to 60 before switching them off. Never turn them off immediately. 4. If you see a child's ball rolling across the field, leave it alone. Do not touch it, kick it, or move it in any way. 5. The radio will sometimes receive messages on Channel 3. These are not for you. Do not respond. Do not adjust the radio. 6. At exactly 2 a.m., go to the press box and open the window facing east for exactly 3 minutes, then close and lock it. Do not look out while it's open. 7. If you hear whistling, stop what you are doing and return to the security office immediately. Wait 15 minutes before resuming your duties. I checked my watch. It was 10:17 p.m. I had 43 minutes before my first patrol. I sat in the chair, the worn vinyl creaking beneath me. The monitors showed static on 2 screens and a grainy image of the empty field on the third. The silence was heavy, broken only by the hum of the fluorescent lights above. I opened the top drawer and found 3 sets of batteries, as promised. I placed 2 sets in my pockets and loaded the third into the flashlight. It clicked on, casting a bright beam that cut through the gloom. At 10:45 p.m., I stood and stretched. My back was already stiff from the uncomfortable chair. I picked up the clipboard and flashlight, ready for my first patrol. The main concourse stretched before me, Empty concession stands on either side, their metal grates pulled down. The air was cooler here, and I could see my breath in the beam of my flashlight. I walked at a steady pace, making notes on the clipboard. 11:00 p.m. Main concourse patrol begun. Temperature 52 degrees. All concession stands secured. No unusual activity. I completed the circuit and returned to the office. At 11:30 p.m., I began my second patrol. This time, as I passed Section 12, I heard a faint sound like popcorn popping. I stopped and listened, my heart beating faster. The sound came from behind the metal grate of the concession stand. I played my flashlight over it. The grate was secure, locked with a heavy padlock. Nothing inside should be making noise. I made a note on my clipboard. 11:37 p.m. Popping sound from concession stand Section 12. Investigation. Grate secure. No visible cause. I continued my patrol, trying to ignore the sound that seemed to follow me. When I returned to the office, I sat for a long time listening to the silence. At 12:30 a.m., I began my third patrol. As I walked, I heard something new, a distant cheering, like a crowd reacting to a play. The sound was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. I kept walking, my pace steady as instructed. The cheering grew louder as I approached the lower bowl entrance, then faded as I moved past it. I didn't look toward the sound, I just kept walking. At 1 a.m., I completed my patrol and returned to the office. According to the rules, my next patrol wasn't until 2 a.m. But first, I had to go to the press box. I checked my watch. 1:55 a.m., 5 minutes early. I waited, my hands slightly trembling. At exactly 2 a.m., I left the office and made my way to the press box. The room was dark, except for the moonlight streaming through the large windows overlooking the field. I found the east-facing window and unlocked it. I opened it exactly as instructed, then turned away to face the wall, counting silently in my head. 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. The night air was cold on my neck. I resisted the urge to turn and look out. At 60, I closed and locked the window, my fingers fumbling with the latch. I hurried back to the office, my footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. At 2:15 a.m., I began my patrol of the lower bowl. As I entered the west section, the lights flickered on, bathing the empty seats in an eerie glow. I stopped, my hand instinctively reaching for the light switch. Then I remembered Rule 3. I stood there, counting to 60, my heart pounding. The lights cast long shadows across the rows of empty seats. For a moment, I thought I saw movement in the corner of my eye, but when I turned to look, there was nothing. At 60, I switched off the lights and continued my patrol, my flashlight beam cutting through the sudden darkness. At 3:30 a.m., during my upper bowl patrol, I heard them footsteps overhead in the rafters. They moved steadily, matching my pace. Rule 2 flashed in my mind. Do not look up. I kept my eyes forward, focusing on the path ahead, my footsteps echoing alongside the ones above. The sound followed me around the entire upper bowl, never getting closer or farther away, always matching my pace exactly. When I completed the circuit and descended the stairs to the main concourse, the footsteps stopped. I returned to the office and sat down, my legs shaking. I made a note on the clipboard. 3:45 a.m. Footsteps heard in upper bowl rafters during patrol. Followed entire circuit, stopped when I reached main concourse. The rest of the night passed quietly. At 5 a.m., I began my final patrol. The stadium seemed different in the pre-dawn light, less threatening, almost peaceful. I completed my rounds and returned to the office just as the first rays of sunlight began to filter through the high windows. At 6 a.m. exactly, I unlocked the employee exit and stepped outside. The morning air was crisp and cool. A new groundskeeper was waiting by the service entrance. He was younger than Henderson, with a nervous energy that made me uneasy. Henderson called in sick. he said, extending his hand. I'm Martinez. You must be the new night watchman. I shook his hand. First night done? He nodded, looking past me into the stadium. Anything unusual? I thought about the popping sounds, the cheering, the footsteps in the rafters. Nothing worth noting, I said. Martinez seemed relieved. Good. Henderson said you were reliable. He handed me an envelope. Your pay for the night. See you tomorrow. I walked to my car, the envelope feeling heavy in my pocket. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror at the empty stadium, its concrete form silhouetted against the rising sun. I wondered what sounds it would make tonight. The second night began much like the first. I arrived at 9:45 p.m., relieved Martinez, and locked the employee exit at 10:00 p.m. I reviewed the rules, then sat in the office, watching the static on the monitors. At 10:15 p.m., the radio crackled to life on Channel 3. Attention Riverside Stadium, this is Control, report status. I remembered Rule 5. Do not respond. I watched as the message repeated 3 times, then the radio fell silent again. At 11 p.m. I began my first patrol. As I walked the main concourse, I noticed something new, a faint smell of hot dogs, as if a vendor had just opened their stand. I paused, sniffing the air. The smell was strongest near Section 8, where the largest concession stand was located. I played my flashlight over the metal grate. It was secure, just as it had been last night. I made a note on my clipboard. 11:15 p.m. Strong smell of hot dogs near Section 8. No visible source. At 11:30 p.m., during my second patrol, I heard a new sound, a child's laughter echoing from the direction of the field. It was distant but clear enough to make the hair on my arms stand up. I kept walking, my pace steady, trying to ignore the sound. At midnight, as I passed the entrance to the lower bowl, I saw it a small red ball, sitting exactly at the edge of the field, near the 30-yard line. Rule 4 flashed in my mind, do not touch the ball. I stood there for a moment, staring at it. It seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight. I made a note on my clipboard. 12:00 a.m. Red ball observed on field near 30-yard line, left undisturbed per protocol. At 2:00 a.m., I went to the press box and opened the east-facing window for exactly 3 minutes. This time, as I counted, I heard something new, the faint sound of a bat hitting a ball, followed by distant cheering. I resisted the urge to turn and look, focusing on the wall in front of me. At 2:15 a.m., during my lower bowl patrol, the lights in the west section came on again. I counted to 60, my eyes scanning the empty seats. This time I was certain I saw movement, a shadow that seemed to detach itself from the others and move quickly up the aisle. When I switched off the lights at 60, the shadow was gone. At 3:30 a.m., during my upper bowl patrol, the footsteps returned, matching my pace exactly. This time they were accompanied by a faint whistling sound, the tune of "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." I froze, my hand tightening on the flashlight. Rule 7. If you hear whistling, return to the office immediately. I turned around and walked back the way I had come, my pace quickening despite my effort to remain calm. The footsteps and whistling followed me, growing louder as I descended the stairs. I didn't look back. I reached the office and locked the door behind me, my hands shaking. I checked my watch. 3:42 a.m. I had to wait 15 minutes before resuming my duties. I sat in the chair, listening to the sounds outside, footsteps circling the office, the whistling growing fainter, then stopping altogether. At 3:57 a.m., I unlocked the door and continued my patrol, completing the upper bowl circuit without incident. At 5:00 a.m., during my final patrol, I noticed something new. The red ball that had been on the field at midnight was now sitting at the entrance to the service tunnels, as if waiting for me. I walked past it, my heart pounding, and completed my patrol. When I returned to the office, I made a final note on the clipboard. 5:15 a.m. Red ball now located at service tunnel entrance, still undisturbed. At 6:09 a.m., I unlocked the employee exit and stepped outside. Martinez was waiting, looking more nervous than yesterday. "Anything unusual?" he asked, his eyes darting toward the stadium entrance. I thought about the ball, the whistling, the shadow in the west section. "Just the usual sounds," I said. "Old buildings make noise." Martinez nodded, wiping sweat from his brow despite the cool morning air. "Henderson called in sick again. I'll be covering his shift for the rest of the week." He handed me my pay envelope. "Same time tonight?" I nodded, though a part of me wanted to say no. "Same time tonight." As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Martinez hurrying into the stadium, as if eager to get inside before the sun fully rose. The third night was different. When I arrived at 9:45 p.m., the stadium was already unlocked. The employee exit door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open and stepped inside, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. "Martinez?" I called out. No response. I made my way to the security office, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The office was empty, but something was wrong. The clipboard from the previous night was missing. In its place was a new clipboard with a fresh sheet of paper. On the desk was another laminated sheet, this one titled "Amendments to Stadium Night Watch Protocol." I read it, my hands trembling. 8. If you find the security office door unlocked upon arrival, lock it immediately and do not leave until your shift ends. Patrols are suspended until further notice. 9. The red ball is a lure. Do not look at it directly. If it appears inside the building, place a line of salt across the doorway where you see it. Salt is in the bottom left drawer. 10. If you hear a voice calling your name, do not respond. It is not Martinez, it is not Henderson, it is not anyone who means you well. 11. The radio will now receive messages on Channel 5. These are for you. Follow instructions precisely. 12. If the lights in the west section of the lower bowl come on and remain on after 60 seconds, leave them on and proceed immediately to the service tunnels. Check the door marked Pool Maintenance. If it is unlocked, do not open it. Return to the office and wait. 13. At exactly 3 a.m., go to the press box and open the east-facing window for exactly 3 minutes, then close and lock it. This is in addition to the 2 a.m. window opening. 14. If you hear whistling, it is no longer safe to return to the office. Proceed immediately to the nearest restroom, lock yourself inside, and wait 30 minutes before resuming your duties. I locked the office door as instructed, my heart pounding. The bottom left drawer contained a large bag of salt, as promised. I placed it on the desk next to the radio. At 10 p.m., the radio crackled to life on Channel 5. "Night Watchman, this is Control. Confirm receipt of amendments." I picked up the radio, my hand shaking. "Night Watchman here. Amendments received." "Good. Follow them precisely. Control out." The radio fell silent. I sat in the chair, listening to the sounds of the stadium. At 11 p.m., I heard footsteps in the corridor outside the office. They stopped at the door, then moved on. At 11:30 p.m., I heard a voice calling my name. "David? David, are you in there?" It sounded like Martinez, but I remembered Rule 10. I didn't respond. The voice called again, closer this time. "David, I need your help. Something's wrong with the west section lights." I remained silent, my hand resting on the salt bag. After a few minutes, the voice faded away. At midnight, I heard a new sound, a child crying coming from the direction of the field. It was faint at first, then grew louder. I stood up and walked to the door, pressing my ear against it. The crying seemed to be coming from right outside. "Please help me," a small voice said. "I'm lost." I remembered Rule 10 again. I didn't respond. After a few minutes, the crying faded away. At 2 a.m., I went to the press box and opened the east-facing window for exactly 3 minutes. This time, as I counted, I heard something new, the sound of water splashing, as if someone had dived into a pool. I resisted the urge to turn and look, focusing on the wall in front of me. At 2:30 a.m., the lights in the west section of the lower bowl came on. I watched them on the monitor, counting to 60. At 60, they were still on. Rule 12 flashed in my mind. I unlocked the office door and made my way to the service tunnels, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The door marked Pool Maintenance was at the end of a long corridor. I approached it slowly, my heart pounding. It was unlocked. I didn't open it. I turned and hurried back to the office, locking the door behind me. At 3 a.m., I returned to the press box and opened the east-facing window for exactly 3 minutes. This time, as I counted, I heard a new sound, a woman's voice, singing softly. It was a familiar tune, but I couldn't place it. I resisted the urge to turn and look, focusing on the wall in front of me. At 3:30 a.m., I heard it whistling, the tune of "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." Rule 14 flashed in my mind. I grabbed the radio and the salt bag and hurried to the nearest restroom, locking myself inside. The whistling grew louder, circling the restroom. I sat on the floor, my back against the door, listening. After what seemed like an eternity, the whistling faded away. I checked my watch. 4:05 a.m. I had waited 35 minutes. I returned to the office, my legs shaking. At 5 a.m., I saw it, the red ball, sitting in the middle of the corridor outside the office. Rule 9 flashed in my mind. I opened the door just enough to create a line of salt across the threshold, then closed and locked it again. The ball remained there, glowing faintly in the darkness. At 6:01 a.m., I heard footsteps approaching the office. A key turned in the lock. The door opened and a man stepped inside. He wasn't Martinez. He was older, with gray hair and a tired expression. "Henderson," he said, extending his hand. "You must be David." I shook his hand, confused. "Where's Martinez?" Henderson's expression darkened. He didn't follow the rules. He tried to open the pool maintenance door during his shift last night. He looked past me into the stadium. "They don't like it when you break the rules." I thought about the missing clipboard, the unlocked door. What happened to him? Henderson shook his head. "Doesn't matter. He's gone now." He handed me an envelope. "Your pay for the night. Same time tomorrow?" I nodded, though every instinct told me not to come back. "Same time tomorrow." As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Henderson locking the employee exit door. His movements slow and deliberate. The fourth night was the longest of my life. When I arrived at 9:45 p.m., Henderson was waiting. "Storm's coming," he said, looking up at the dark sky. "Radio might go out. If it does, follow the emergency protocols." He handed me another laminated sheet. "Read this carefully. It's only for extreme situations." I took the sheet and read it. Emergency protocols. 1. If the radio goes silent for more than 30 minutes, begin a continuous patrol of the main concourse. Do not stop for any reason. 2. If the power goes out, proceed immediately to the press box. Light the emergency candles, located in the desk drawer, and wait. Do not leave until power is restored. 3. If you hear multiple footsteps moving in different directions, find the nearest restroom and remain inside until the sounds cease. 4. If the red ball appears inside the security office, create a circle of salt around your chair and do not leave until the ball disappears. 5. If you see someone who looks like Martinez, do not speak to them. They are not Martinez. I folded the sheet and placed it in my pocket. "What happened to Martinez?" I asked again. Henderson shook his head. "He got curious, wanted to know what was in the pool maintenance room." He looked at me, his eyes serious. "Some doors aren't meant to be opened." At 10 p.m., I locked the employee exit and made my way to the office. The storm was moving in, the wind already howling around the stadium. At 10:15 p.m., the radio crackled to life on Channel 5. Night watchman, this is control. Storm approaching. Secure all exterior doors and windows. Emergency protocols may be necessary. Control out. The radio fell silent. I checked the exterior doors on my monitor, making sure they were all secure. At 11 p.m., the first clap of thunder shook the stadium. The lights flickered, then steadied. At 11:30 p.m., the radio crackled again. Night watchman, this is control. Power outage expected within the hour. Proceed to press box when lights go out. Control out. The radio fell silent. I gathered the emergency candles from the desk drawer and placed them in my pocket, along with a lighter. At midnight, the lights flickered again, then went out completely. The stadium was plunged into darkness, except for the occasional flash of lightning through the windows. I grabbed my flashlight and made my way to the press box, my heart pounding. The wind howled through the empty corridors, sounding like voices. I reached the press box and lit the emergency candles, placing them on the desk. The small flames cast dancing shadows on the walls. I sat in the darkness listening to the storm. At 1 a.m., I heard footsteps in the corridor outside the press box. They were moving quickly in different directions as if searching for something. Rule 3 flashed in my mind. I grabbed the candles and hurried to the nearest restroom, locking myself inside. The footsteps grew louder, circling the restroom. I sat on the floor, my back against the door, the candles flickering in the darkness. After what seemed like an eternity, the footsteps faded away. I checked my watch. 1:45 a.m. I had waited 45 minutes. I returned to the press box, my legs shaking. At 2 a.m., I opened the east-facing window for exactly 3 minutes, as instructed. The rain blew in, extinguishing 2 of the candles. I relit them and closed the window, my hands trembling. At 2:30 a.m., I heard a new sound, a child's laughter, coming from the direction of the field. It was faint at first, then grew louder, seeming to come from all directions at once. I sat in the darkness, listening, my hands clenched into fists. At 3 a.m., I opened the east-facing window again for exactly 3 minutes. This time, as I counted, I heard something new, the sound of a door creaking open, followed by a splash. The pool maintenance door. I resisted the urge to turn and look, focusing on the wall in front of me. At 3:30 a.m., the lights flickered back on. The radio crackled to life. Night watchman, this is control. Power restored. Resume normal duties. Control out. I returned to the office, my legs shaking. The red ball was sitting in the middle of the room, glowing faintly in the light. Rule 4 flashed in my mind. I created a circle of salt around my chair and sat down, watching the ball. It didn't move. At 4 a.m., I heard footsteps approaching the office. A key turned in the lock. The door opened and a man stepped inside. For a moment, I thought it was Martinez. He had the same build, the same uniform, but his face was wrong. His eyes were too wide, his smile too fixed. "David?" he said, his voice a perfect imitation of Martinez's. "Henderson sent me to relieve you early. Storm's getting worse." Rule 5 flashed in my mind. I didn't respond. I just sat there, surrounded by salt, watching him. The Martinez thing's smile widened. "Not going to talk to me? That's not friendly." He took a step into the room, then stopped, his foot hovering over the line of salt. "Ah, I see. Henderson told you about the salt." He looked at the red ball, then back at me. "Clever. But salt only works for so long." He turned and walked out, closing the door behind him. I heard his footsteps fading down the corridor. At 5 a.m., the red ball disappeared. I stood up, my legs cramped from sitting for so long. At 6 a.m., I unlocked the employee exit and stepped outside. The storm had passed, leaving the air clean and fresh. Henderson was waiting by the service entrance, looking exhausted. "He came to you, didn't he?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded. "Looked like Martinez." Henderson nodded slowly. "They learn. They adapt." He handed me an envelope. "Your pay for the night, same time tomorrow?" I thought about the Martinez thing, the red ball, the pool maintenance door. I need more money, I said. My brother's treatments are getting more expensive. Henderson looked at me, his eyes calculating. $20 an hour, but you have to do something for me. What? Check the pool maintenance room. Just look inside. Tell me what you see. I thought about Martinez, about what Henderson had said happened to him. No. Henderson's expression hardened. Then it's $12 an hour. Take it or leave it. I took the envelope. I'll be back tonight. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Henderson unlocking the pool maintenance door, his movements slow and deliberate. The fifth night was my last. When I arrived at 9:45 p.m., the stadium was dark except for a single light in the press box. Henderson was waiting by the service entrance, holding a flashlight. "Change of plans," he said, his voice tense. "You're not patrolling tonight. You're staying in the office. No exceptions." He led me to the security office and handed me a new set of keys. "These are for the office only. Don't go anywhere else." He pointed to a new laminated sheet on the desk. "New rules. Read them twice." I read the sheet, my hands trembling. Final protocol. 1. Do not leave the office for any reason. 2. If you hear knocking, do not answer. Count to 60, then play the radio on channel 5 for exactly 3 minutes. 3. If the red ball appears, create a circle of salt around your chair and do not leave until it disappears. 4. If you hear whistling, put on the headphones, located in the top drawer, and play the static loudly. Do not remove the headphones until the whistling stops. 5. At exactly 2 a.m. and 3 a.m., open the east-facing window in the press box for exactly 3 minutes. The press key is on your keyring. 6. If you see Martinez, do not speak to him. He is not Martinez. 7. If the power goes out, light the emergency candles and wait. Do not leave the office for any reason. 8. At 6 a.m., unlock the employee exit and leave immediately. Do not wait for Henderson. Do not look back. I looked up from the sheet. "What's going on?" Henderson shook his head. "Doesn't matter, just follow the rules." He handed me an envelope. "Your pay for the week plus a bonus." He walked to the door. "Lock it behind me. Don't open it for anyone until 6 a.m. I locked the door as instructed and sat in the chair, watching the monitors. The static seemed louder tonight, more insistent. At 10 p.m., I heard knocking at the door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Rule 2 flashed in my mind. I counted to 60, then turned on the radio, playing the static loudly for exactly 3 minutes. The knocking didn't return. At 11 p.m., I heard footsteps in the corridor outside the office. They stopped at the door, then moved on. At midnight, I heard a new sound, a child's laughter, coming from the direction of the field. It was faint at first, then grew louder, seeming to come from all directions at once. I put on the headphones and played the static loudly, drowning out the sound. At 1 a.m., I heard whistling, the tune of "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." Rule 4 flashed in my mind. I turned up the static, the sound filling my ears. The whistling grew louder, seeming to come from right outside the door. I closed my eyes, my hands clenched into fists. After what seemed like an eternity, the whistling faded away. I checked my watch. 1:45 a.m. I had waited 45 minutes. I took off the headphones, my ears ringing. At 2 a.m., I went to the press box and opened the east-facing window for exactly 3 minutes. This time, as I counted, I heard something new, the sound of a crowd cheering, as if a game was in progress. I resisted the urge to turn and look, focusing on the wall in front of me. At 2:30 a.m., the red ball appeared in the middle of the office, glowing faintly in the light. Rule 3 flashed in my mind. I created a circle of salt around my chair and sat down, watching the ball. It didn't move. At 3 a.m., I returned to the press box and opened the east-facing window for exactly 3 minutes. This time, as I counted, I heard a new sound, the sound of a door creaking open followed by a splash. The pool maintenance door. I resisted the urge to turn and look, focusing on the wall in front of me. At 3:30 a.m., I heard footsteps approaching the office. A key turned in the lock. The door opened and a man stepped inside. It was Martinez. His eyes were wide, his skin pale. "David," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Help me." Rule 6 flashed in my mind. I didn't respond. I just sat there, surrounded by salt, watching him. Martinez's expression contorted, his mouth stretching into an impossible grin. "Not going to help me? That's not friendly." He took a step into the room, then stopped, his foot hovering over the line of salt. "Ah, I see. Henderson told you about the salt." He looked at the red ball, then back at me. Clever. But salt only works for so long. He turned and walked out, closing the door behind him. I heard his footsteps fading down the corridor. At 4 a.m., the red ball disappeared. I stood up, my legs cramped from sitting for so long. At 5 a.m., the power went out. I lit the emergency candles and sat in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the stadium. At 5:30 a.m., I heard a new sound, a woman's voice singing softly. It was a familiar tune, but I couldn't place it. It seemed to come from all directions at once. I put on the headphones and played the static loudly, drowning out the sound. At 6 a.m., I took off the headphones, my ears ringing. I gathered my things and walked to the employee exit, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. I unlocked the door and stepped outside into the early morning light. I didn't look back. I walked to my car, my legs shaking, and drove away without a backward glance. I never went back to the stadium. I found a different job, working nights at a warehouse. The pay wasn't as good, but it was safer. A week after I quit, I drove past the stadium. There was a for sale sign outside the main entrance. I pulled over and got out of my car, walking to the service entrance. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. I made my way to the security office, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The office was empty except for a single sheet of paper on the desk. I picked it up and read it, my hands trembling. Stadium Night Watch Protocol 1. Between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m., patrol the main concourse every 30 minutes. After 1 a.m., patrol every hour. Never vary from this schedule. 2. When you hear footsteps in the upper bowl during your patrol, do not look up. Continue walking at the same pace. Do not speed up or slow down. 3. The lights in the west section of the lower bowl will sometimes turn on by themselves. If this happens, count to 60 before switching them off. Never turn them off immediately. 4. If you see a child's ball rolling across the field, leave it alone. Do not touch it, kick it, or move it in any way. 5. The radio will sometimes receive messages on Channel 3. These are not for you. Do not respond. Do not adjust the radio. 6. At exactly 2 a.m., go to the press box and open the window facing east for exactly 3 minutes, then close and lock it. Do not look out while it's open. 7. If you hear whistling, stop what you are doing and return to the security office immediately. Wait 15 minutes before resuming your duties. Below the rules in a different handwriting was a note. Follow these rules precisely. They're all that stand between you and what's waiting in the dark. I've tried to make it simpler, but they keep changing. They keep learning. Maybe you'll have better luck than I did. Henderson, I folded the paper and placed it in my pocket. As I turned to leave, I heard something, a faint sound of whistling, the tune of "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." I didn't wait to see where it was coming from. I ran out of the stadium, not stopping until I reached my car. I drove away and never looked back. A month later, I read in the newspaper that the stadium had been demolished. The article mentioned that the demolition crew had found something strange in the pool maintenance room, a series of tunnels leading nowhere, walls covered in strange symbols, and a single red ball sitting in the middle of the floor. I cut out the article and placed it in a box with the rules, a reminder of the 5 nights I spent babysitting an empty stadium. Sometimes when I'm working nights at the warehouse, I think I hear whistling in the distance, but I know it's just my imagination. At least that's what I tell myself.